Good morning, and welcome to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende, physically located in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, but serving members and friends not only in Mexico, but all over the U.S., Canada, and beyond. I'm the Reverend Tom Rosiello, minister of the fellowship, and on behalf of the whole congregation, it's my privilege to welcome you this morning. I'd like to extend a very special welcome to our guest minister who will deliver this morning's sermon, the Reverend Amanda Poppei. Amanda is the newly appointed senior minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington, Virginia. She comes to that position after serving for 12 years as the senior leader of the Washington Ethical Society. Amanda holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Religious Studies from Yale University and earned her Master's of Divinity at Wesley Theological School. She's served in numerous leadership positions, including with the Chesapeake UU Ministers Association, the National Leaders Council of the American Ethical Union, and the Washington Interfaith Network. She's also the past president of the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association. Amanda serves as the member of the UUA's Ministerial Fellowship Committee, a very important position, the position which certifies ministers to be eligible to be candidates for ministry in our tradition. Amanda and her spouse and two children, ages 9 and 12, live in Silver Springs, Maryland. She was last with us physically here in San Miguel 2 years ago to lead worship, and it's a pleasure to welcome her back virtually. You'll hear from Amanda later in the service. And now we enter into our time of worship. We sometimes ask, what do we mean by that term worship? So I'd like to begin by sharing these words of the Reverend Jacob Trapp, describing what he believed it means to worship. To worship is to stand in awe under a heaven of stars, before a flower, a leaf in sunlight, or a grain of sand. To worship is to be silent, receptive, before a tree astir with the wind or the passing shadow of a cloud. To worship is to work with dedication and with skill. It is to pause from work and listen to a strain of music. To worship is to sing with the singing beauty of the earth. It is to listen through a storm to the still small voice within. Worship is a loneliness seeking communion. It is a thirsty land crying out for rain. Worship is kindred fire within our hearts. It moves through deeds and kindness and through acts of love. Worship is the mystery within us, reaching out to the mystery beyond. It is an inarticulate silence, yearning to speak. It is the window of the moment open to the sky of the eternal. It's our tradition and that of most Unitarian Universalist congregations to light a chalice to mark the beginning of our time together. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our faith tradition, so when we do this, we identify ourselves as Unitarian Universalists. But the meaning of this simple ritual is much deeper and more significant than just that. We use this ritual to set this time apart from other time, to make this time a time when we let go of superficial distraction and engage with the world and each other from a deeper place within, from a place where we connect with those principles and beliefs which both sustain us and guide us to be our best selves. May this flame burn with the warmth of love, the light of truth, and the fire of justice. We are gathered here as seekers, seekers of the very essence of things. We enter that journey through silence and stillness. We grasp what we find, and we let it carry us, sustain us, In it we flower and we find harmony. Please join in singing a hymn from the Transylvanian Unitary tradition, Find a Stillness, number 352. The words will now appear on your screen.
Find a stillness, hold a stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Bonney McDowell. Welcome to San Miguel. Are you joining us for the first time today? If you'd like to learn more about the fellowship, please contact Chris Chase at the email in the chat box or send her a private chat right now. We encourage you to join one of our Zoom discussion groups. Read about them on the order of service that came in your email, or for more information, you can contact Deanna Amaya at her email in the chat box. We welcome your feedback on this service. If you have thoughts to share with us, please send them to Cathy Cánepa at the email in the chat box. The Zoom breakout room discussions, which happen after the service, have been very popular. They're great places to reflect on the service and to meet with old and new friends. To participate, just stay connected and you'll be assigned to a small group right after the music ends. After you accept your room assignment, you will wind up in a room with 4 or 5 other people. And if there are only 1 or 2, just sit tight for a minute and Dan can reassign you to another group. At the end of the service, we post a question that will kick off your discussion. The rooms will stay open for about 20 minutes, and afterward, you can rejoin the big group for some chatting and catching up. Are you considering choosing this fellowship as your spiritual home? It's an important commitment which requires careful thought. We would welcome you to make an official commitment to membership by filling out the membership form and making a financial commitment to the fellowship that reflects your financial means and your spirit of generosity. More information is on the website, which is also in the chat box. And now, a few thoughts from the fellowship's COVID-19 task force, a group of medical professionals and care team representatives. There is, unfortunately, no change in our basic message. The number of cases in the state and here in San Miguel continues to rise sharply. We encourage you to think very carefully before you undertake any activities outside your home. Please avoid groups of people, avoid poorly ventilated indoor spaces, avoid prolonged contacts, even if you're maintaining a 6-foot distance. Wear your best fitting mask whenever you're out of the house. On a different note, We share your concerns about the reopening of schools here and up north, concerns for the children, the teachers, and all the families. There is no simple solution to the problems involved. In a similar way, the gradual reopening of community activities here in San Miguel raises our level of concern. We all long for live music and theater again in San Miguel. However, gathering for performances in indoor spaces, even with masks and distancing, is still a considerable risk. We also share your frustration with the continued restrictions on our activities. The guidelines we're being asked to follow are a pain in the neck. But now is the time to bring your conscious awareness to the things which raise your spirits. Find a moment to savor something every hour of every day. Let's continue to enjoy our lives in San Miguel while we continue to be safe. Thank you.
Please join with us on reading our spoken covenant, which should appear on your screen. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
We now enter into a sacred time in our service, a time when members and friends share significant joys, sorrows, and concerns with their community. If you have a joy, sorrow, or concern that you would like me to share in a future service, please do not hesitate to email it to me. And if there is something you need to share this morning, you may now type it into the chat column. Our first candle is one of joy. Marian Kerner in Florida writes, "What a joy to be able to visit virtually with my old San Miguel friends, some of whom, like me, are scattered all over the world." And we know that this is a joy that many others share as well. Our second candle is also one of joy, one that started earlier in the week with a bit of concern, but we want you to know that Jane Wilkinson had a slight stroke but is doing great and has hardly missed a beat. We're so grateful that she did not suffer any impairments from it. Sending Jane our best thoughts. As Bonney mentioned, as we see the regular school year approaching, several of you have expressed concerns to me about children and their education and about teachers and parents deeply affected by the policies of school districts. Many of you are concerned about your own children and grandchildren, some of whom are teachers or school workers and others students. You've expressed both concern for their health and also for the quality of the education they need to receive. Several of you have also expressed concerns as to how children will be cared for if school is not back in session and the parents need to work. This is certainly a situation of great uncertainty, and that only contributes to our worry and concern. So this candle is for the safety and well-being of children, teachers, and school workers, and for creative ways to continue quality education and make childcare available to those who need it. Several of you, observing the 75th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, expressed concerns about the escalation in nuclear weapon production in the world, and also the concern that 75 years out, we are forgetting the horror caused by nuclear weapons. And many of you called for an end to all nuclear weapons. Lynn Knox asked for a candle of gratitude, and I have to say I'm a little embarrassed to share this joy, as it is in part a candle of gratitude for my ministry, but it's broader than that. It's for the board's vision to hire new skilled and professional staff, including Diana Amaya and Diego Vargas, to help bring us this service and other fellowship Zoom activities. And I would add to them the many volunteers like Paula Peace, Cathy, Cánepa, Joseph Plummer, and the other members of the Sunday Service Committee who work untold numbers of hours each week creating this service. This candle is a big thank you for everyone's effort. Finally, we light a candle for the joys, sorrows, and concerns that you've typed into the chat this morning, and for those that are held deep in our hearts but remain unspoken. Let us now enter into a time of prayer, meditation, or reflection with these words of guidance from the Reverend Earl Holt. He writes, "This quiet time is an invitation to be calm in the midst of the tumult of the world and our overbusy lives, to bring together thought and feeling, mind and spirit, and to find some center, some still point of perspective and peace. May we feel free to look at ourselves with true honesty. May we be unafraid to face the decisions we have been trying to avoid and the doubts and questions it has been easier to ignore, the things we have tried to keep hidden, not only from others, but even from ourselves. May we come to discover that there are resources within ourselves and beyond us that are as hidden but as real as our secret doubts and fears. New dimensions of the spirit within and without will be revealed to us as we confront ourselves honestly and come to understand that we are not isolated from the community of life and spirit, but that our soul suffering connects us with the hidden suffering of others. May we come to see that in our deepest loneliness we are not alone. And may we be emboldened by this vision to reach out to others in their need, and so finally to discover that to give is not only more blessed than to receive, but to give to others is to receive what we most need for ourselves." Please join me in a time of silence.
As you know, our UU Fellowship is self-supporting, and we rely on contributions from members, friends, and visitors to sustain our work. Information about how to make your donation is in the chat box, and we urge you to be generous. When you donate, you can specify if you want your donation to go toward your pledge or to our minister's discretionary fund. Just note this in the notes section of the donation. But otherwise, it will be credited to our general fund, which helps us meet the expenses of the fellowship, including this service, as well as the annual grants that we make to 11 carefully chosen community organizations. 50% of this fellowship's income goes to our grant fund. One of our grantees is the Escuela de Educación Especial, which is dedicated to educating deaf children and young adults in San Miguel. Did you know that there are no publicly funded schools for the deaf in the entire state of Guanajuato, and no instruction in Mexican Sign Language in the public schools? Can you imagine going through life never being able to communicate? This wonderful school has been physically closed since March, but their online classes have allowed the students to continue their educational progress. Raphael recently graduated from high school, and he's the fourth student in the school to accomplish this. Another of the recent graduates, Laurita, has already begun her courses for her undergraduate degree. She's a terrific student and has a support team from this school, which gives her a sign language translator who makes videos for her in sign language of the course materials that she's studying. And Laurita has already gotten high marks on her first exams and papers. When she gets her degree, Laurita plans to come back as a teacher at the Escuela Especial. Without the exceptional school that we help fund, she would never even have dreamt of such a wonderful goal. Deaf kids can really rock with the right opportunities. Please be generous.
Paula, thank you so much for that beautiful music. It is such a joy to get to work with Paula, and as I'm sure you all know, you have a real treasure there. When Paula and I spoke about this service, and I said, well, gosh, you know, I wonder if we could be a little playful and try It's My Party and I'll Cry If I Want To. I never imagined that she would not only be absolutely happy to say yes to that, but then make it sound like a beautiful concert piece, as we heard in the beginning. So Paula, thank you so much for that. It is my party and I'll cry if I want to. That feels a little bit like a theme song these days. Some of us are having what might be called pity parties for ourselves, and we deserve them. Things are tough. I wonder if you have hugged someone recently. I mean, someone not in your household, not in your pod or on your quarantine. Have you hugged someone using the protocols laid out in the New York Times article, How to Hug During a Pandemic? It's the worst. Hugging someone now, you have to walk forward slowly and carefully. Then as you come close, turn your head to the side while they look in the other direction. Everyone's masked, of course. Quick hug and then back, all the while remembering not to breathe. So you start really with a deep breath in, 10 feet apart, then walk forward, turn heads, hug, back, step back. Finally, you can exhale. The worst, or actually not quite the worst. The worst, I guess, is not hugging at all. That, I feel like, is what we have right now. The worst and the slightly less worst. The bad and the also bad. The I don't want to and the I really don't want to. And then every once in a while, we have some good stuff. And even that isn't quite what we hoped or remembered it could be. I have been looking forward to the Fellowship of San Miguel for almost 2 years now, since my first visit, September 2018. I remember meeting some of you as I came on that visit with my mother, and have been planning this visit with my husband and our children since, I think, a few days after I landed back at home in 2018. And here we are. I am with you and not with you. We are gathered together and not. This isn't what we wanted at all. I had hopes of bringing my children through the streets of San Miguel, of adding to my San Miguel jewelry collection, of getting to go into the beautiful museums again, and just soaking up the air in the central square. This isn't what I wanted at all. There is a children's story that I love by Patrick McDowell. It's about a little, I don't know, maybe he's a dog or a cat or a sort of amorphous animal creature named Louis. Little Louis goes hopping along his day as the story begins, tra-la-la-la-la, happily aware and awake in the world. And then as you turn the page in this story, you see that peanut butter and jelly has been smeared on the pages of the book. As you go through the children's story, there's an orange juice stain and crayons all over it. Little Louis doesn't want that at all in his story, and he tries over and over again to start the story anew, to have it go just perfectly. Until finally, as you might imagine, by the end of the book, he realizes that this messed up story is the story he has to tell, and that it will be just fine. Perfectly Messed Up Story by Patrick McDowell. I recommend it to you today and all through these times, because indeed here we are in a perfectly messed up kind of story. We are moving, it feels to me, and perhaps to you as well, into a new phase in our global engagement with COVID-19. Cases continue to rise, as you heard from Bonney and from the task force earlier today. Stay-at-home orders are returning in some places. School systems are making decisions to remain virtual or to try a hybrid model, the worst and the least worst options before us. And the stories that we may have told ourselves back in the spring that this would be over in a few months, or that there would be a big lull during the summer, are proving false. We are sinking into a new reality, I find. With that reality comes a whole new awareness of losses. Summer camps and family reunions missed, trips canceled, even just the regular summer plans of pool visits or backyard barbecues, of staying out late in the bright evening sky or hanging out with a friend on your deck. Those plans are changing. Our expectations are shifting. Pauline Boss is the author of the book Ambiguous Loss, Learning to Live with Unresolved Grief. Boss wrote that book a number of years ago about what we often think of as a grief experience, the loss of someone to death or the loss of them in our lives. And she wrote about the idea of ambiguous loss, that sometimes loss isn't one big loss, but all the different pieces that pile up in our lives. Pauline Boss appeared recently on Being with Krista Tippett, and she talked about the way that people have been writing to her and sharing that that book, originally about loss from death, is resonating in a whole new way for them. How we corporately around the globe are experiencing ambiguous loss right now. All the little losses adding up. And then for some of us, and this varies widely by community and demographic, huge and tragic losses. Loss of life, loss of income or livelihood, loss of food security or housing security. All of those losses, the big ones and the little ones, add up into a sense of ambiguous loss. Grief that seems to be not just about one thing that we could pinpoint, but rather about all of them somehow, including the ones that feel so insignificant we should hardly care about them, given everything going on in the world. And oh yeah, there is that, that everything going on in the world. Because in addition to the personal losses that COVID might bring to any one of us, we also see today the loss and injustice all around us. In Portland, Oregon, and in other cities in the United States, as federal agents have moved against American residents and citizens. In the racial disparities in COVID cases, and particularly in COVID deaths, both because of pre-existing health disparities in our system, and because, as Caroline Powell of thinkglobalhealth.org put it, quote, Blacks and Latinxes are overrepresented among essential workers who must stay in their jobs, particularly lower skilled positions where they are at greater risk of exposure to the virus, end quote. We see these days so many ways, so many examples of the United States' original sin of racism, born before its founding, and how it continues to harm people of color and entrap us all in the States. So what are we to do? We who see this global pandemic, who experience the individual loss in our own lives, and who see the injustice all around us in the country of our origin or in the globe at large. I believe that is the crux of the spiritual dilemma we face in this moment. What are we to do? Surrounded by disappointments, large and small, by injustice and personal loss, how do we figure out the best response, best for us, best for our families, best for the world? I have been thinking a lot these days about the Serenity Prayer. You probably know that prayer. It is often quoted. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You might imagine that the prayer is overused or trite, but sometimes I find that things that are used frequently are done so because they hold a deeper wisdom if we allow them in. God or inner self or community strength or ancestors, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The devil's in the details, I think, or the spiritual growth is in the difference, the wisdom to know the difference. I want to start unpacking that just a little bit, and to begin with acceptance. Because as we think about the losses of COVID, particularly that those who, like me, live a relatively privileged existence have suffered, I do think acceptance is the order of the day. As I look back on the last 4 months and the moments when I have been able to open my heart a little more to living in the reality of the moment and to find some peace in that reality, I think about the times when I accepted what was. For me, one of those times was putting away my children's backpacks. Our house doesn't have a mudroom, just the end of the kitchen, as many houses built in the 40s do. And so the end of the kitchen is where the boots go and the coats go and the backpacks go and everything goes. I was trying to clean it up one day about the middle of April and get it straightened up yet again. It's a weekly occurrence. And I suddenly thought to myself, I don't think the backpacks need to stay at the end of the kitchen anymore. I don't think my children are going to be picking up those backpacks and taking them to school for a while now. And so we found some baskets and put all of their school supplies in baskets that they kept in the living room or in their bedrooms, and we put the backpacks in the back of the closet. There was an experience of loss with that we wouldn't need those backpacks for a while. But it also felt like we were accepting the reality of what was, that we were shifting the way our home was set up to make it work better for what life is today. Perhaps you have had experiences like that. Maybe you've set up a home office to work better for you, or you've changed your lighting so that your Zoom conversations are better lit. Maybe you've deleted things from your calendar and even gone out a couple of months. That won't be happening in the same way I thought it would. And although perhaps you hold the grief and loss of that change, maybe like me, it has also allowed you to accept what is. Buddhist teachings help me with this, teachings that remind me to welcome all that is, the painful and the joyful too. Teachings that invite me to let go of expectation, to let go of attachment to outcome. You'll notice that I said invite me to. I'm terrible at this, of course, because I'm only human. That's why it's a practice and not an achievement. Tara Brach, the Buddhist teacher, says that acceptance is, quote, recognizing the truth of this moment without resistance, end quote. She doesn't say you have to love the truth of this moment. Just recognize it. Ah, this is where we are. And this is where we are, connecting here over Zoom, checking in with each other, saying how good it is to see each other again. It's fine. Just like little Louie's perfectly messed up story was fine in the end. Not perfect, of course. I don't know if you remember the health craze of the 80s when people started substituting carob for chocolate. I remember it in a moment of trauma when my mother handed me a plate of supposedly chocolate chip cookies. I took one bite and it was immediately clear they were not, in fact, chocolate. But you know, they were still cookies, still sweet. We have a lot of carob in our lives right now, I think. Not chocolate, not what we were craving, but still sweet, still satisfying in a different way. Acceptance, though, of reality of carob cookies is only the first part of that serenity prayer. The second is courage to change the things I can. And as we move out of a space of loss, and that loss is real and requires pity parties and attention and care, into the space of injustice, of systemic racism, of state-sanctioned violence, we move, I think, into that space of courage, or at least we are invited to. The Serenity Prayer, as you might know, has been popularized in part through 12-step programs where it's used frequently as people journey along in recovery. It was actually written by the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, and I read up on Niebuhr a little to remind myself of exactly who he was and where this prayer may have come from. I was reminded that he was very much a man of action. Niebuhr originally had been part of a pacifist organization and eventually left that organization to advocate for American involvement in the Second World War when he became aware of the atrocities there. This isn't a sermon about pacifism versus just war theory, though that is an important topic, but rather about Niebuhr's pull toward action. Niebuhr spoke against the KKK, supported Martin Luther King Jr. in his work against the Vietnam War, at a time when many of MLK's supporters had deserted him as he moved from civil rights into anti-war work. Suffice it to say that Niebuhr wasn't kidding when he wrote a prayer about the courage to change things. He knew whereof he spoke. And it made me think of other people of action. There's a quote that has been attributed to civil rights icon Angela Davis, and I've seen it around Facebook and in other places more and more these days. The origin of the quote, it turns out, is actually unclear, and the attribution to Davis may not be correct. But I think we can understand it for these purposes as consistent with her life's work and the work of many civil rights workers. The quote goes like this: "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept." Whoever the original speaker of that quote, it's clear it was a response to the Serenity Prayer and perhaps an invitation to wonder whether our wisdom to tell the difference has, as a people, tipped too frequently toward acceptance, toward slow movement, toward how can we change these things that seem like the only way we've ever done it. In the United States, we are having conversations now about ideas like prison abolition and the defunding of police, reinvestment in community programs, ideas I'd heard about for years, but couldn't quite imagine how they might be possible until I started seeing communities try them out in different ways. That quote of Davis's or of someone else's with a similar passion, it invites us to wonder, I think, whether we might be able to change more than we realized. The serenity to accept what I cannot change, the courage to change what I can, the wisdom to know the difference. There is, I think, a spiritual task in each part of this simple phrase. I don't have the answers to know what lives in each column. Just as an example, should I accept that with 2 full-time jobs and 2 children, my family will just be constantly on edge this coming year, and therefore breathe into that reality, giving us all a break when it gets rough? That would be column A. Or is this an invitation to look more fully at the pace of life that capitalism demands of us? Column B. I hope, though, that together we might be able to explore the questions, to wonder where the wisdom is. Is this something I accept? Or is this a place where I am called to courage to change? I hope for myself and perhaps for you that in this time of uncertainty and confusion, that I will spend some time wondering, seeking wisdom, building my capacity for acceptance to recognize the truth of this reality, and building too my capacity for courage to change the reality that might yet be changed. And as long as all of us are somewhere there, accepting and changing, seeking wisdom together, I think this perfectly messed up place will be just fine. Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you this morning. I invite you now into the music that we share together.
When I am down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come and my heart doesn't beat, then I am still and wait here in the silence until you come and sit right with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains.
Thank you all for being with us today, for being part of this gathered community, and for the many ways you support the work of this fellowship. I especially want to thank Amanda for her message. Amanda, it's been a pleasure to have you back with us, and we look forward to your participation in our service again next week. You know, over the past few months, the words of one of our luminaries from the past, the 19th century Boston Unitarian minister Theodore Parker, have figured prominently in the discussion of the issues of our times. He was the author of those famous words Dr. King so often quoted, and we hear spoken now, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And he wrote the words that Abraham Lincoln quoted in the famous Gettysburg Address, describing democracy as the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But he also wrote some wonderful words about his aspiration for our faith tradition. And in a different way, they seem most appropriate also for our time, especially as we gather virtually. Hear these good words, benediction, if you will, from Theodore Parker. Be ours a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love. Its profession of faith, divine living. We'll now extinguish the flame, marking the end of our time together for this morning, but certainly not the light that we carry with us to support us and guide us for the week ahead. And may peace be with you till we meet again.